Let's do it live on a Tuesday edition of Cleveland Browns Daily. Merely Bo, the great Z. The roads are dangerous out there, kids.
Yeah, be careful.
As you're traversing.
480 bridge shut. 15 accidents, supposedly.
Yeah, we got our ace traffic report.
By the way, I love that. The funny thing is when I finally got a hold of Gibbe after I talked to you to let him know that the bridge was closed, I'm like trying to get off the freeway, which I finally did, and then I'm navigating through all the roads or whatever, and it ended up taking what should have been, a half-hour drive took an hour and 5 minutes.
Right.
It could have been longer. Could have been much worse.
Could have been much worse.
We had some daring moves that paid off. But the funny thing is, I called him, and he's like, oh, yeah, 10 accidents on the bridge. Like, why do you know that?
Why did he knows that?
Why did you know that? Yeah, but he doesn't have to go over the bridge.
Alerts on your phone?
But you got to remember who you're dealing with Gibby. You're talking
about
a guy.
Traffic.
Weather, traffic.
Yeah. I live for that.
This is his world. That's his world. He lives. That's his situation.
I knew this morning when there was a line of cars on my street in Olmsted Falls to get to 480.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's not good. There is nothing positive about what I'm seeing right now. And I know that's what happens. It's the one road that you can kind of cut through to get to Columbia to get to 480.
Yep.
And when it's backed up, something bad's happened on 480.
Well, the silver lining in what happened Saturday is that Gibbe now has more time to pursue his weather and traffic interests.
True. There's time now.
There's a little more time for
sadly.
that. Very sadly.
So this is the first time we've been on air since what happened on Saturday. Now that you have some time, how do you make sense? It's not losing to Houston, a supernova rookie quarterback, really well coached. They obviously had a plan. The manner with which it happened was stunning. I mean, I was so confident Friday. You and I did the show Friday. You were en route at that point. We were very confident. We talked all week about the C.J. Stroud struggles against man defense, his struggles against pressure, all of the things that we thought would work well didn't.
We played a lot of zone and we didn't get pressure.
Yeah, it was strange. It was spectacular.
And we did play our fair share of man, but yes, to your point, absolutely.
Yeah, it just did not go the way we thought in any way, shape, or form.
So I'll go top level, then I'll go here's what was bad, here was maybe where it wasn't as bad as it maybe feels. Like 45-14, you look at that and you're like, it's a boat racing.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it was.
It was, yeah.
But, all right, so first overall, big sentiment. It felt like that the defense did two things. One, it was almost stubborn in terms of, who it was and said, we're not going to really change anything. We're not going to go double Nico Collins. We're going to play one-on-one. We're going to mix in a fair amount of zone. We're not going to give him different looks or different post-snap rotations that are confuse him. We're the number one defense. We're going to play our brand of defense. And that didn't work for a variety of reasons. Number one, you didn't get pressure on the quarterback at all. Really. In fact, the only times I think he was hit in the game were twice by JOK and once by Sione Takitaki on linebacker blitzes. So that's not generating pressure. That's not helpful to what we're trying to do here. The other thing is we were the team that on defense made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
We made a lot of mistakes with our eye discipline, with reading our keys, and then going through, and thus, there were 8 times that a player on the Texans in the game was 5 yards behind the deepest defender of the Browns. That what that number should be in a game?
Good grief.
It should be 0.
Well, it felt like that.
Well, because it was.
Yeah.
You had, Greg missing a jam on the one that took him down to like the 4-yard line. You had Ronnie Hickman had a dreadful game. He played like an undrafted free agent rookie when the lights were on bright. And I remember talking to you, and you said one of the knocks on him coming out of Ohio State was inconsistency because the good was obviously very good, but this was
great.
He was biting on. Listen, if they're trying to make you come up when you're a deep safety, whether it's a deep half as he did in a cover 2 or as the deep safety in a cover 3, if they are trying to run something in front of your eyes, it's because they're trying to run something behind you, and you need to know that. And so there was a failure, I thought, on that level as well. The Browns in this game generated 9 pressures total. I mean, it's the lowest pressure rate we've had all season. So that was a problem. Okay, so Poor effort by the defense. 0 sacks, 0 takeaways. You could have set that at the over-under at a half. Under.
Both ways. Yeah.
0.
Yeah.
And by the way, now we're tied, right, because of his lack of belief. Gross.
He's doing a victory lap.
He's only tied. Well, I guess. So what did we decide then?
I guess we'll have to do it in the postseason. I don't know what we're going to do.
Strength?
I think we have to go to the postseason.
Maybe go to the postseason.
All right,
is the
fine.
way that it goes. It could be.
Anyway,
we're not ending in a tie.
No,
I refuse.
No.
Can't have it. Can't have it. Yeah, he was under pressure. It's just nuts. So that part of it was crazy. Stroud picked us apart, whether it was clean or under pressure. He played a great game. You tip your cap to him. So defense, to me, I've put a lot of the focus on the defense. Now, that all being said, there are a lot of talk. What they rested the guys. I would have a easier time understanding that if we weren't ahead 7-3 and 14-10.
I don't think the
like we weren't
had anything
rusty.
To do with it. I think it's one of those things that when it doesn't work out for you, you can point to it. But I just think that's nonsense. I don't buy that in any way.
The other thing is
Joe Flacco came off his couch and was fine.
Right.
So the notion that an NFL player not playing in a meaningless Sunday
By the way,
lose mojo. Come on.
He was very good in the first half.
He was spectacular in the first half. That gets lost because of the picks.
Because we lost. And yes.
But he was sensational in the first half. And the crazy thing is the other thing that you talked about in leading up to it, and I do want to circle back on some of the defensive things. You said you've got to be able to run the football. You cannot be one-dimensional, and that didn't happen.
Well, we couldn't.
One-dimensional because you're chasing it.
But in the first half, you end up down 24-14, and that I put a lot on the defense. The defense in the first half gave up 286 yards on 27 plays. I'm pretty decent at math. The fact that 286 divided by 27 is over 10, that feels like they averaged a first down a play, feels like a problem. Feels like not very good. We said you got to eliminate chunk plays. This is just in the first half. They had a 76-yard catch and run touchdown where we tackled like we were the Philadelphia Eagles. More on that later, I'm sure. A 37-yard touchdown to Dalton Schultz, 27-yard catch to Mechie, a 38-yarder to Nico Collins. I mean, that's in the first half. So, and a 29-yard run by Devin Singletary. So it didn't eliminate chunk plays. But going back to the offense, and going back to just overall in this game, with 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, or in the third quarter, 6 minutes to go in the third quarter, or just over 6 minutes to go in the third quarter, the Browns had the ball 1st and 10 at the Houston 34, down 10.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very much a game at that point. You feel like, okay, we're going to get 3, maybe 7 would be great, but it's going to be a one-possession game, and now the pressure, at least in that situation, shifts a little bit onto the young team that's ahead, and they're trying to hold you off. And instead, as we know, with 6 minutes and 21 seconds left, James Hudson, and you go back to the things that we had gotten away with, right?
Oh, God, yeah.
We had gotten away with our 4th and 5th tackles all year. Well, on that play, the pick 6, the only reason that play even happens is because James Hudson got absolutely roasted. Now, Elijah had put on a double move that I think, had he had time to throw, I think maybe is a touchdown. Instead, he tries to throw it away. He was not trying to complete a pass. He was trying to throw it away. Doesn't get enough on it. Pick over. That was the game at that point. That was the game.
Really
you got another pick 6, and then they get another touchdown.
But you're going for it on your, that's a 4th down on your own. It's desperate times at that point.
Right. But with 6 minutes to go in the third quarter, you were you were ready to make this a one-possession game.
And we didn't get a chance to see defensive adjustments because of it.
Well, no.
Because of that. So, you didn't get to see what would have changed at halftime defensively because the game is cooked with that pick.
Right. Because you did get you got the ball back, not a 3-and-out, but you forced a punt on their first possession to open it. That was our first possession. The pick six. Good night, Irene. The first half of the defense, though, was, I think, inexcusable. I mean, it's first time ever the number 1 defense has lost to a rookie quarterback ever in the history of the NFL in the playoffs. And we didn't play like the number 1 defense. We played like the number 31 defense because I will keep us ahead of Philadelphia's performance.
It felt like in the first half of the football game that C.J. Stroud had the answers to the test and that their offensive coordinator had the answers to the test, that they knew that they were their ability to put us in incredibly vulnerable situations with relatively some of it is you mentioned the plays specifically, but the amount of guys just running free. And I haven't seen the all-22 like you.
A lot of that's our fault, though.
Sure.
We had, for example, on the Dalton Schultz touchdown, the right coverage for that. But the deep third on that side ran with a crosser inexplicably.
Yeah.
And the safety came down. So now you had 2 guys on that crosser, nobody in the deep third.
Right.
So that's on us.
Sure.
But I do think Slowick called an excellent game. In fact, I thought the sequence that led to their first touchdown, they run a toss to the right, picks up 29 yards. Mm-hmm. They get down near the goal line. Then they go to that same look, fake the toss to the right, and it's a throwback screen left to Nico. That was like, Slowick's good. And he comes from – and a lot of stuff they did was similar to stuff we do.
Yeah.
Which is even more inexplicable why it was confusing us. It felt like the defense thought they were going to show up and dominate.
And I don't know if that was the false hope of the last time because of the way that they played. We acknowledged all week. People, you guys didn't talk about Stroud enough. Oh, my God, we talked about him all week.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about him all week. We used the stat with him and Montana and Brady as guys who led the league in passing yardage per game and what was it, completion yardage per
him,
throw
Brady,
or
Montana in yards per game and then touchdown to interception.
Touchdown to interception. That's it. We talked about that last week.
1989, 2007, which are 2 of the greatest quarterback seasons ever.
And a rookie.
And this
kid. So we talked about the difference that he would make. We talked about the difference it would make having their defensive ends be, relatively healthy in the game. And that's what it seemed like. It was almost like, well, we hammered him this time. He's a rookie quarterback. How could he possibly be ready for this? And indeed he was. He was more than ready. He was sensational.
Yes, he was great.
You're right. Self-inflicted a lot of it, but
totally.
But they made a lot of their own.
Of course.
And so you try to put the game in. It just is a shame because the game is not in many ways it's not representative of what you are, and yet in some ways it's representative of the worst of what you were with the turnovers, which is something we lost that battle every game this year, save for 6, and only 3 times did we win it all season long.
In our 4-game winning streak, we had pick sixes in 2 of them, gave up a kick return touchdown in another
Very
one.
much
it was. And the smoke and mirrors aspect finally caught up to us because the defense played poorly. I mean, if you were to look around the league in terms of the lowest graded defensive players in the NFL for the week, Hickman, Duron Harmon, and Greg Newsome are at the top of the list.
Yeah,
that's not good. Miles did not have a dominant game like you needed him to. Nobody really did. I think it was kind of a rough outing all around. But the things that were your problems, right? Like defense on the road. And I don't know how you look into that, what the breakdown of that is, how you understand why we could be. The crowd makes that much of a difference. Great job, crowd. Take a bow.
Yeah.
But defense on the road this year was a problem all year. Turnovers were a problem all year. And eventually, at some point, you had to think against somebody that the tackle situation was going to become a problem. And guess what? All of those things came to fruition in one game on top of the fact that you made uncharacteristic coverage busts that were like we did in 2022.
Yeah, we haven't really dealt with much of that.
No.
That was kind of the one thing that was different. All the rest of the things you explained, we've always gotten pressure, and we've usually been pretty disciplined in the secondary. Despite a ton of injuries back there, you've been pretty disciplined there. We talked in the last couple of weeks about how sensational Ronnie Hickman had been leading up to the game against Houston, to the point where I think last week on the show we talked about how he made somebody's all-rookie safety team. He was the safety.
Yeah, Schwartz talked
he was
about
great.
How great he had been, maybe the best rookie safety he's worked with in terms of his communication and knowing what everybody's supposed to do. And then he got in there, and it was like brain freeze.
Yeah. The other thing that sucks about it is because of the nature of the game, the fact that it was over, apparently very obviously over, certainly after the second pick, and even after the first one, it felt like, boy, I don't know, that's a lot to try to come back from, even with a quarter and a half down, would have been down 17 at that point. Is that it makes just a poor taste on what was one of the most sensational seasons and most spectacular seasons of any sport I've ever covered or been a part of. Just improbable ups and downs, the canyons that you felt this year and the highs that you felt this year. I've never been a part of anything with that type of dichotomy where the highs were so high, the lows were so low in terms of you put yourself in the position you were in as a fan with the injury to Nick Chubb and the injury to Deshaun Watson, and then you put yourself into where you were on the Thursday night when you clinch and that building. You're not going to find anything better than that. So it just sucks because even if you would have lost to Houston but have played your best, you tip your hat and you go, okay, this is the playoffs. It's hard. It's big boy stuff. We're not as we were. We are not fully formed the way that we were intended to be. This has been a hell of a year, but you gave it your best. But because it ended the way that it did, that takes the wind out of the sails of what was really one of the most remarkable sports seasons I've ever been a part of.
So the word that I kept kind of saying was that it was an unbefitting end.
Good word.
To what had been a spectacularly fun season and 4.5 months of joy for this town, 4.5 months of joy for us, for everybody, unbelievable moments, Jim coming back against the Steelers, DTR leading us on that game-winning drive the week after we had just beaten the Ravens and we think we're going and Deshaun's back and then he's out and we win that game and then, to the clincher against the Jets, just the way that it felt in the city and everybody was on fire and nobody, I think, saw this coming. And, to your point, the way that the game went on the plane ride home, I was talking to Jim and Jim was so dialed. Like he hadn't been, think about this, he had not been in person for a playoff game since 2002.
Oh, gosh, that's right. Because he's here in 20.
So he had not called a playoff game in person since 2002.
Yeah.
So think of everything he's been through twice since that time. And he was so dialed in. I thought he was so good. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to it. The first half, was so good. And then it became like a preseason game in the third quarter.
It was over so quickly.
So suddenly. So the pick six. Good night.
Back-to-back pick six. It's like
really the first one you were like you kind of knew, but then the second
you
one
still
was,
have a glimmer.
Sure, the second one was
all right, let's get a stop. We can get but then it was like the next play.
That was
like,
the cement
okay, I
shoes.
guess we don't need to watch anymore. I guess that's it. It's done.
Yeah,
it was brutal. It was brutal, that part of it, and it does. If it's a competitive, if you would have shown your best, even your flawed best, and this team, to me, was the best, most flawed team that I've ever been a part of.
That's why they're so lovable.
It's why they are, because you shouldn't have been here, for so many reasons.
For sure. And I think what hurts the most is when we think about why this was such a flawed team, we transfer that that's on the offense. The offense was the pluckable, lovable underdog. Yeah, Flacco's going to turn it over, but he's going to make some big plays, just as he did in this game.
Yeah.
Kareem Hunt off the couch. He scores 2 more touchdowns. Chief has become a star. But, you had lost your tackles, and, you tried to overcome that. You lost Nick Chubb. You lost Deshaun Watson. And then the defense was supposed to be these are the dudes. We got you. We're going to cover up those warts. And then the D got roasted. And then the warts came after that. I mean, offensively, I thought you had a pretty darn good first half.
You couldn't have done a whole lot better. What was Flacco, 15 and 19 at half?
Yeah, something like that for
he was sensational.
Over 170 and a touchdown.
He and CJ were both near perfect
just
in the
dealing.
first half.
Yeah.
On everything. The idea that was the way we were winning, too, tells you how backwards this thing got, because I don't think Stefanski ever wanted to be a guy who was playing in a playoff game, attempting 20 passes in the first half.
He was 15 and 19 of 172, a touchdown. Rating of 122. He was sacked twice, though, and we ran 9 times for 24 yards.
So you couldn't run it. You were entirely one-dimensional. And so, that's the part that's what makes this – it's a tougher thing,
Another thing that stood out to me in that game that shocked me is they were so much faster than us.
It sure seemed like it.
Getting to the perimeter, getting to the edge, they were so much faster than us, and it almost looked like – at times, Jerome Ford looked like he was moving in slow motion. It was just.
I agree.
That was an odd part of it. But like you said, it was a very, very fun season. I think it was very difficult to see the defense performance. And one thing I can't believe I got this far without saying it. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was the best player on the field for the vast majority of that game.
He this season
Super
played
star.
into his ceiling as a prospect. He played to, and I think the ceiling is now higher even in terms of the type of disruptor he is. But this was coming all season. We lamented the fact that he wasn't a Pro Bowler and how much that's just ridiculous. And then I thought he had a chance to be in as a second-team All-Pro or something like that. He played that way on Saturday. He was a missile, an absolute missile, man.
I mean, he was, I think that says it all. Best player on the field. 9 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss. He was everywhere. He's got some of the only pressures that we actually got on the quarterback and hits on Stroud. And I think what's incredible about him and how much he's grown is, and we'll talk about this because I have a few of these type of conversations I wanted to be able to shed a little light on. But, he was a guy. So in Houston, when our locker room, when you leave the locker room, you actually walk the entire length of the field to go out of another tunnel, and then that's how you get to leave. So they have to walk past our bench. So at the end of the game, I did my post game, and then I just kind of sat on the bench, and I figured that there are some people that on the team that I've developed relationships with that I wanted to kind of talk to at the end of it and stuff. And one of them was JOK. And his maturity, obviously, I think the tragedy, and he said as much, the tragedy that happened with his brother forced him to be very introspective about how he was conducting his business and what he really wanted out of football, but more broadly life. And he was the best player out there. And I thought that it was so impressive, and I told him that. And it's funny, the first thing he said back to me is, yeah, but I should have dropped off on the 76-yard touchdown. That was my fault. And even in his presser, he was like, I could have been a lot better, which is an unbelievable perspective to have. And he's been so thoughtful, so conscientious about, I think, his words and his actions. And he really has become a superstar and a leader of this team. I mean, I think that, you take into account the fact that since the year, there's only been in the last 12 years, 3 players who have ever had 100 tackles, 20 tackles for a loss, but fewer than 5 sacks. Because to get 20 tackles for less, you got to be playing behind the line of scrimmage pretty much every play. I mean, it was like Max Crosby, Daniil Hunter, and maybe Watt were the 3 that were – there were 3 people that were ahead of him in that category. The only other ones that ever did it were Luke Kuechly in a year where I think he may have been Defensive Player of the Year. Mm-hmm. And then we're talking Levante David, peak of his powers 2012.
Yeah.
That's it. So he did something very historic this year. He's grown in such a way. And we had as a team 5 tackles for a loss. He had 4 of them, and the one that he didn't have, he hit the guy first, didn't make the tackle, and then Dalvin cleaned it up.
Right.
So he really had all 5 negative plays in the game were directly attributable to JOK.
Yeah, he was a heat-seeking missile. He was absolutely sensational. Today is Joe Flacco's 39th birthday. Happy birthday to Joe. The Joe Flacco, I don't know how you're going to – it's so crazy to put that month into perspective of what he did for this team.
Linsanity. Because Linsanity lasted. It had
this felt more it felt more like real sustainable to me. Linsanity was – that kind of felt fluky.
Yeah.
Nothing about Flacco's play seemed fluky
right, because
to me.
He'd been
because he's established. But to have him paratroop in, because you're right, it's number 1 defense that allows for us to have this season, and the offense was the plucky offense. But if he doesn't come in, we're not there. Our offense became Joe Flacco for a month, where he's throwing for 300 yards every game. It became him and Amari Cooper.
He did it
again.
Njoku,
and he did it again in this game. Whatever we were able to get offensively was on the arm of Joe Flacco. And, that's nuts that happened. The idea that our first touchdown in the playoffs was Joe Flacco handing to Kareem Hunt, what in the hell are we talking about? How did this happen?
And our second was Joe Flacco shovel pass to Kareem Hunt.
What are we talking about?
He's the only 38-year-old ever to have 5 straight games of 300 yards passing. Only one ever. Brady never did it. Breeze never did it.
It is going to be a month that will be remembered only forever here. The way that he played, the leader that he was. In the last couple of weeks, he was kind of like a face of the franchise.
Completely.
In a month, it happened. It was such an incredible thing.
From the time he took over, he led the NFL in passing yards, passing touchdowns, and interceptions.
There it is. The full experience.
You got it all.
Yeah.
He was great. So he's another one of the guys when he was walking off, and he was beaten up, dejected.
Yeah.
I don't think obviously nobody wanted it to end that way. So that doesn't even really need to be said. That's just that's a given. That's obvious. But what I said to him was what an honor it was to get to know him.
It's a good word.
And what an honor it was to watch him kind of live his dream again and give this city. And what I told him is, I said, who knows, obviously what happens from here, but you did something in a month where, and you could look at it, you became the most popular he's ever been and all that stuff and the stuff for his family and you got to play in front of your kids and all that. But I said, what you did for this city and this region and really around the world for Browns fans is that you gave a generation of Browns fans that maybe had not had that moment that's going to make them Browns fans forever. You had fathers and sons and fathers and daughters, mothers and daughters, families there on that Thursday night to be a part of or through the television feel what happened in Cleveland. And a lot of it is, and it's not singularly, but a lot of it is due to Joe Flacco.
Yes.
And so he obviously should hold his head very, very high. It's easy to do when you're 6'6", but even higher than that. And I just kind of, we had a little embrace, and I was just like, the story of whatever this organization becomes kind of after this is impossible to write without what you contributed in a month. And that is, I think, a very powerful thing because I think it's part of the culture that has been built here, and then it's part of the culture and the fabric around the organization. Everybody hates the way this ended. I hate the way it ended. Everybody does. But the ride that we went on and the ride from the time that, to think about in L.A., you see him on the UCLA practice field, and I'm like walking around and people being like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Like, this is insane.
You came in and you called me. You're like, dude, he looks good. I'm like, come on, what are you talking about?
Like, dude, he looks unreal.
I'm telling you, he looks unreal. Like, what? Off the street or off the couch?
Unreal.
He looks unreal?
Yes. I remember talking to a couple of the coaches, and they were like, yeah, we've got to go with this guy, and we have a chance to win big.
It changed. Him coming here changed everything. And I do think that it was an honor and a privilege. I love that word that you used. It was an honor. There is a couple of generations, because we have not been able to have like a full Deshaun season for what he is and what he was in Houston. We haven't been able to have that yet.
Taste.
You got a little taste, in the Baltimore game. You get a taste, but you don't get you never got the full experience. Like Joe Flacco for a month gave you what a franchise quarterback gives you: a chance every Sunday, out front of organization. He was everywhere. Like, that's what it's like. And we got like a taste of that for a month. And I'm appreciative of that forever.
Totally.
That was awesome.
And the thing that's so crazy from the Deshaun standpoint is he went 5-1 this year, but it was disjointed, right? It was under tough conditions, good gutsy play against the Bengals. Week 1, you get a win. Then he's kind of lights up Tennessee. That was like, you're like, oh, that's like, you're like, okay, all right, we're good. And then week 2, I'm sorry, it was Pittsburgh. Week 3 was Tennessee. So it was like good, bad, good, injury. Try again in Indianapolis. Come back. Couple of good, really good against Arizona, but they were like hapless at that point. And then you have the Baltimore, and you're like, all right, let's back. Go. Done for the year.
Yep.
And then you had, DTR gave you a gutty win. PJ had given you some gutty wins. And then, Flacco comes in, and you're like, okay, we've steadied the ship. This guy's making huge plays, throwing for astronomical numbers. And he's a great play-action quarterback. I really think if there's anything we can take out of this Flacco experience, or if the Deshaun can, it's how do I add to my game the ability to be that effective in back-to-the-field play-action, hard play-action. Because if he does, he's definitely better in straight drop-back situations than Flacco is. He can also then extend plays and or drives with his legs.
Yep.
So he gives you all of that. That's the one element where he just like kills people on the play action that hasn't been there. And that's what, in this system, you watch a kid like Jordan Love.
Yeah.
Jordan Love, it's those play action chunks. And Flacco's stats, Flacco's yards per attempt on play action is like 13.
Yeah, it's all
That's
chunks.
where it is. It's all
all there.
He needs that play action. Deshaun, if he can get to that point, and I really think that should be the focus of everything, is the under the center, pre-picture, back to the defense, that picture, read it, and hopefully, I know he's talked with Flacco quite a bit. Maybe Flacco can help kind of explain these, or kind of this is how I see it. because if that's the case, I think we have a chance to be an incredible offense going forward. But, yeah, Flacco, it was an honor. It was a privilege. We haven't had many people even be in the studio. He came in here.
Starting quarterback?
In here was great.
Awesome.
I know last time we had a starting quarterback in studio with us.
Baker?
Early.
Yeah, early rookie year, Gibbs? Yeah, probably rookie year, Baker.
Because the only memory I have of him in here, like vivid, was when you're like introducing yourself. You're like, I'm a Heisman voter.
No, he asked why we had the Ed Oliver statue.
Oh, yeah, you said I'm
I said I'm a Heisman voter, and he said me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
But that was definitely
That's
the
his
first.
rookie
That's the
year.
first time
we interviewed him maybe one other time. No, that was the first time I interviewed him
Yeah.
because I started that year.
Yes.
I started his rookie year, so I
Okay.
didn't interview him in the draft process.
It was the Ed Oliver conversation first,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then we interviewed him in a tent
Well, we
That
know
was
at
it.
mini
That's the-
camp,
that's
which
the
is
four
one of the
horsemen.
5 greatest moments.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the four
the
horsemen.
four
In show
horsemen.
history.
And that would have been in mini camp, right?
Yes, that was
Of
in mandatory
19.
mini camp.
Yes,
Of
19. So that was after we
because
had
Freddie was.
we
now
had
the
Odell
coach.
and Freddie and all of that. So
Yeah.
that's how that. So that would have been 19. So that's in here though 18.
Can you name the 4 Hossmen?
Do we even want to expose that to the
No,
people?
no.
I think we leave that.
No.
We leave
Okay,
that fun
all right.
between
The
us.
mystery.
Leave that mystery. between
Could you
us.
have done it?
Yeah, I could have.
I know you could have.
Yeah.
I think he gets 3 out of 4.
I don't know if I get all 4.
I will find out in the break.
I bet you do. I bet you will. If you think about it, I think
Think
I
hard,
you will.
Gibby.
So look, it was everything. This season had it all, and it kind of went out with a whimper, and that was
It was
the
unbefitting.
That's the perfect. It was. I love that word. It's a good word. Good job to you. As for what's next, well, that's a conversation we'll have now until the Greenbrier next year, provided we go back. You're going to have this conversation every day, but we will start it in terms of the offseason outlook. Needless to say, critical offseason for this roster and how it's going to be shaped and what it needs to be improved upon. We will start to have that conversation coming up next. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Ballybet, sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns, now live in Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Hi, Bo here for my friends at Jim Beam. What do sports and Jim Beam have in common? Both are better when enjoyed with others. Grab a bottle. Gather your friends. Enjoy the game because with Jim Beam, you come as fans and you leave as family. Kentucky Straight Bourbon, 40% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2024. James B. Beam Distilling Company, Claremont, Kentucky. Drink smart. Look forward to this partnership with our great friends at Jim Beam over the course of the next months and in unveiling many of their products that we will be doing.
Oh, baby.
So it's going to be a lot of fun there.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be very.
Very.
I don't know where to begin. There's so much here. This is Jake Trotter and the folks at ESPN put this kind of together in terms of the off-season outlook. And obviously this will be a conversation that will be had in varying incarnations many times between now and you're going to have this conversation in the lead up to free agency and the draft and the combine and all of this stuff. You finish at 11-6, a final FPI ranking of number 15. The estimated cap space right now is minus $12.7 million, so there's going to be some restructures.
Yep.
There is not a first-round draft pick on this roster because that one goes to Houston as part of the Deshaun Watson trade. Some of the thoughts that were given here from the this has got to be Jake, right? It's got to be Jake.
Yeah.
Jake writes.
Yeah, there's no link that I looked at.
It was Jake Trotter, but a couple of other writers contributed to this portion of the article as well.
Okay.
So Trotter wrote some of it, and then some other guys did as well.
Jake's the best. Cleveland should focus on extending coach Kevin Stefanski, general manager Andrew Berry. I would imagine that would be one of the first jobs. The team has no first-round pick. Will pick 54th in this year's draft. Will have a chance to select an impact player at that spot. Their big prediction for the offseason, despite questions about his return from a knee injury, the Browns will sign Nick Chubb to an extension, which will allow him to keep him past the 2024 season, while also lowering his cap charge to help the Browns get under the number. There's going to be a lot of time for all of this. How, I suppose, let's just think bigger picture. How do you take the organizational character that was developed in this season and apply that to an offseason? And I remember we had Paul DePodesta in here. I can't remember if it was last offseason or the one before. And it was one of the first times he was on with us. And he said, he talked about the Browns way. And we said, well, what is that? And he said, well, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not going to define it, but we know what it is. I think what we saw this year is the Browns way. The stick-to-itness that this operation had, the fact that they all rode in the same direction despite obstacle. How do you make sure that that is now who you are? And so that even when things don't go your way, you have the intestinal fortitude that this one did to keep going in the right direction and be part of the character of the team. To me, that is – we'll get into the specifics of upgrade receivers and running backs and what do you do with certain rooms. But that, to me, has got to be the focal point is this is who we are. How do we now build upon this going forward and make sure that this is the baseline?
Right, and that's the challenge in the NFL because it's often very fleeting to be successful. But as we kind of take a look at the lay of the land for the Browns, here are the guys that will 100% be back next year. Okay, let's just kind of start there.
You ready for that?
Yeah, just kind of broad. This is broad strokes. So there are people that are under contract.
We got like shows till May.
I know.
We do them through the summer too.
We will.
A lot of shows.
We will.
Let me get my pen. If we're doing this, I want to get a pen.
Well, you were saying like, how do you kind of keep it together?
Oh, I see what you're doing. I like where your head's at.
Yeah, like
always trust the private school. Give you a long reign.
All
Let
right,
secretary, get out there and run a little
Yeah,
bit.
let me run a little bit. So here are the guys that are under contract that have guarantees next year.
I love you so much.
Why?
I just adore you. I adore you.
Why?
Let me run a little bit.
Just let me run a little. Come on, ponies. They just want to run. That's all they want to do. Deshaun, obviously, at quarterback.
Yep.
Chief at tight end. Wills and Conklin at tackle. Posick at center. Okoronkwo at the edge. Dalvin at tackle. Ward and Newsome at corner. Thornhill and Delpit at safety.
You did Garrett, didn't you?
No, because he's at the point now where he's going to be, yes, but I'm going to talk about that in the second part.
Oh, okay.
So then here are the guys that are under a contract but don't have guarantees. Anybody that's on their rookie contract, throw them out.
Yep.
So here are the guys that have big numbers that I think are the candidates for restructuring to keep your core together and provide financial flexibility. Nick Chubb, Amari Cooper, Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, Myles Garrett.
Significant names, sir.
Significant to the core.
Yep.
And so you have then in this room, because these are people I would imagine, and look, you might have to make a hard decision on.
You're gonna have to you can't
on one or two of these guys.
Yeah.
That just might be the reality of it. But the reason that I point this out to you is that you have then individuals that are under contract to you that you have the ability to perhaps manipulate their number for the short term to help maintain this, and kick some of the can down the road. So, for example, Amari Cooper going into this season in 2024, depending on how you, again, all these different designations.
Sure.
But if it was, for example, a post-June 1st cut, and I'm not advocating, nobody listen to this and say that I'm talking about getting rid of Amari Cooper. It's $3 million of dead money. It's $20 million of savings. Mm-hmm. Okay? That makes him, to me, absolutely a guy that you could restructure and then just throw like a little bit of it down into the future. Miles would be put Miles in the other one. Miles, he is a candidate for restructure, but he's going to be here. Nick Chubb is a $12 million savings on the cap with a $4 million dead if he's before or post. Batonio, for example, is $8 million of savings post June 1st. Wyatt would be $7 million of savings post June 1st. Again, not saying that they'll cut these guys, but because of the way that these contracts are structured, those are people who are eligible, I think, to really be restructured on their contracts. And that helps you keep your core, drops your cap number. What did we say right there? 20, 28, 34, and $46 million. Mm-hmm. So those are, I think, candidates to help you get other people. And then who are the guys that you probably are interested in keeping that are true unrestricted free agents? Flacco. Receiver, I don't know. Jakeem Grant's been hurt. I don't know. Goodwin, you don't know. Prochet. Tight end would be Harrison Bryant. Akins is another guy that doesn't have necessarily guarantees to him that could be $2 million of savings. Yep. Maybe you draft a guy and say, okay, there's $2 million. On the line, you've got Jaron Christian's an unrestricted free agent. Michael Dunn's an unrestricted free agent. Nick Harris is an unrestricted free agent. Defensive end, Za'Darius is an unrestricted free agent. And then you got Shelby, Maurice Hurst, Jordan Elliott, all unrestricted free agents in your defensive tackle room. Yeah, and Siaki Ika did not give you any confidence that you're like, okay, this guy's a stud in our rotation next year. His game against Cincinnati was, unfortunately, terrible, Kenny.
Yep.
Linebackers, Awak, Taki, Matt Adams, big special teams guy, Kunashik, Jacob Phillips, who's unfortunately been hurt all year. Cornerback, Mike Ford Jr., pretty good on special teams. Safety, McLeod, Duron Harmon, probably McLeod, but how does he come back? Or do you feel confident now? Bell and Hickman showed you a lot. I think maybe you can get away with some savings there. And then your special teams, Bork is an unrestricted free agent and was a darn good punter. So
that's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on, but the restructure piece of it is pretty good.
It's funny, like with as smart as our people are and as willing as our ownership is, when I see like the negative cap thing, I'm zero concern about that.
Yep.
I think that'll get sorted out. I don't worry about that at all. I think the thing that is going to be really paramount for this is you mentioned all of those names, and a lot of those guys are homegrown guys who have developed into superstars here, stars and superstars here. They are also a lot of names that you just mentioned who are smack dab in the middle of their prime.
Yep.
And so you have a job as an organization to max out right now. You are in the middle of it right now. And if Deshaun can stay healthy, maybe there's another window down the road 4 or 5 years from now where all of the roster comes together and you can make several runs at this thing. But in terms of being a Super Bowl contender, that is something that has to be done this offseason. And I think that in addition to keeping most of the guys that you just mentioned, you need to buttress spots on this team in order to contend with the teams that are still playing right now.
Wide receiver
has to be job one. And I honestly don't know because of, who knows, like Nick's timetable. But I think you got to buttress at running back too. I think you got to be more explosive there behind Nick Chubb. So I think wide receiver and running back have got to be like top of mind. The good news is most of the other things you talked about, because we had injuries this year, like for example the 2 tackles with Wills and Conklin, like DeJuan Jones is stud. So you're really good at that spot. The guard situation, the interior offensive line, you mentioned Harris. Well, you're pretty good at a lot of those spots based on the guys that you've developed. I mean, Whippler's going to be a guy.
You are,
at some
but
point.
you have to wonder at some point, like,
can you pay all of these
Can you
guys?
continue to pay your all 5 on the offensive line? And the answer is no. And where's it going to come from? It's going to come from the interior. At some point, they're going to make a decision on the interior of the offensive line to not pay one of those guys.
Would seem like guard is kind of the logical spot for that. So these are the hard decisions that are going to be made. But there's a tremendous amount to be optimistic about based on everything that you saw this year and based on all of the names you just mentioned, so many of them stars or superstars in the case of the guys at the very top, but also a tremendous sense of urgency to find more dynamic play at wide receiver because that was something that was glaring in the game against Houston. As good as Flacco was in the first half, and Amari, God bless him, was playing hurt, clearly. Wasn't his normal self, and you didn't have Tillman in the game, and you just weren't getting much out of anybody else.
And Elijah only got
year.
1 target in the whole game. And you just wonder – here's what was interesting to me about Elijah Moore, because I think everybody, when coming out of the Green, everybody expected him to have significantly better numbers than he did.
Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting is if you go to the Jets game Amari's ruled out before the game. He basically goes into the Amari role and balled out.
Yeah. Yeah, had a really nice game.
But it feels like our offense is predicated upon Amari, Chief, checkdown, or sometimes Chief, Amari, checkdown. We don't really utilize or have not consistently all of the options and kind of taken advantage of necessarily. It's designed for the isolated receiver. Much like the Texans' offense is that designed for the isolated receiver in terms of Nico Collins. Like Nico Collins and Amari were the only 2 receivers in the league that had more than 500 yards when isolated. And so I was encouraged by the Jets game because that was the one where it was like you put him in that role and he was actually really good.
Yeah.
But I think we need to look at why we don't distribute the football more effectively to multiple people. Think about it. Like
great question.
DPJ,
I was just going to go there.
Who has been very good.
Yeah.
He was getting no targets. Really, Tillman got no targets in that role either. Elijah hardly got any. The targets went to Amari and to Chief. And I'm fine with that. But if you want to be consistent week in and week out, I do think there's something to where the ball is. And now our scheme is – here's the other part. Our scheme is so good that when you have the primary guy, they're going to get the ball a lot. But I think that, like, Elijah Moore is talented.
No doubt.
And he creates separation, and he catches pretty much everything that's thrown to him. I think there needs to be a little bit of an examination of maybe we make them think, spreading out who actually truly is the primary if you have guys that you believe in. And I do think, whether it be a T. Higgins, whether it be that second-round pick, like, you've got to get another receiver in here. No question.
Yeah.
Because Amari is amazing, but he's getting up there in age.
Yeah.
And you saw, and it's both seasons. By the end of the season, last year he had an injury, I think, like to a core muscle. And by the end of this season, he was battling the heel and clearly was not, who he was in that game against the Texans last time.
Yeah. To me, that's top job is that situation. Once you figure out your cap and make some tough decisions that might have to be made there, then the next is you got to have some weapons to this thing because you're not – you have to be unfortunately, we continue to be in the AFC, and now they've added another dude to that mix with Stroud. So, I mean, it's not a coincidence. It's Lamar, it's Stroud, it's Josh Allen, and it's Mahomes. And Burrow's coming back next year healthy.
Watson,
Herbert will be better next year.
Herbert.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'm not saying I still am not ready to count out Trevor Lawrence completely. I mean, he was pretty beaten up this year. Trevor Lawrence is very good. the kid in Indianapolis with Shane Steichen is going to be good. I mean, they had a pretty good season with Minshew, and Richardson can give him a little more than Gardner Minshew can. And by the way, watching the just complete collapse of what the Eagles are on offense following Steichen's departure is wild and tells you what a big piece of what they did he was. Same with Gannon on the defensive side. Like, they are I feel like they're – we'll talk about – when do we talk about Belichick? That's
coming up.
Way later? Okay. I think that I have a theory on this Atlanta interview, which I'll get to then. Teaser. There you go. Hour 2.
There you go. That, among other things. Yeah. Hour 2 coming up next. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Ballybet. Sports betting partner, your Cleveland Browns, now live in Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. And the Rolling Stones Hackney Diamonds Tour is Saturday, June 15th, Cleveland Browns Stadium. Tickets on sale now. Visit clevelandbrownsstadium.com/Rolling Stones for more information on that. It was the super wild card weekend. We had the postponement of the game between the Bills and the Steelers, which led into yesterday. And with the holiday, it was kind of nice having a little double dip there, even as you were dealing with your calamity.
I'm going to call it we haven't even gotten into that yet. I'm going to call it a happy accident, and I'm going to call upon the National Football League to give me 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday, 2 Monday going forward.
Here's what you have to do, though. If you're going to do that, the 2 Monday games have to be either dome or warm weather, because if you can't have a situation now where weather would force a postponement of a Monday game.
Fair.
So you have to go, if you're going to do 2 Monday, which I'm a proponent of, then you have to do, one of them's got to be, it's got to be a game. They both need to be warm weather or dome.
It was so much nicer on Sunday to have only 2. Was able to have a good, productive,
I agree.
full
It wasn't
day,
overwhelming.
hang with the kids. You got that in the game that I really wanted to watch, which turned out to be
Best.
the only decent game of the weekend.
It really was.
It was the only decent game of the weekend.
Yeah, the rest from
Was
tough watches.
what I wanted to watch, and it delivered on every
It's
level.
awesome.
But I was juiced for it, stayed up, no problem. You started. I think it's the way to go. And I like the 4:30 people on the West Coast. Dude, listen,
Well, it could always line up with MLK, too.
right, and you right. So you have a day off. I think it's perfect. I think you do it. I think that's the way you go from now on. 2-2-2. Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I was in the ER. I was able to put my YouTube TV on my phone, and I was getting stitched up watching the game.
You're okay,
Thankfully.
but it's quite the wound.
Yeah.
What exactly did you do?
What did you do, Ray? Well,
Great follow-up.
so
Do
let me-
either one
let's-
of you know that movie?
Look at him looking.
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Boy, I watched it with
do you know who Gozar the Gozerian is?
No clue. That's such a shame.
That's all. It seems.
I
Do you know who Dr. Peter Venkman is?
NBC watched it
Jeez
with me
Louise.
this summer. We watched it.
That's on them. Like that's a show.
It's on parenting.
It's on. Yeah, there's a lot of blame.
A lot
to
of
go
parenting.
around.
Yeah, parenting issue there.
Thanks, Mom.
Failed.
Yeah.
Failed
Fail,
everybody. Mrs.
fail.
Uno, you failed everybody.
The movie's Ghostbusters. We
It was
moved forward.
Ghostbusters. Classic.
Come on.
And I mean, it's such a classic. They
It's
remade
timeless, too.
it. They tried to remake it.
It holds up perfectly. It's great.
It's great.
Other
all right.
than the running beast. That thing looks a little weird.
Well, they didn't have the technology then to really make that
No, they did not.
gargoyle come to life and look great. It looked
No.
great in close proximity.
It did, yeah. But then when it would run, it was a little chunky at that point. Anyway,
They
you
didn't
were
have the
saying.
CGI. So Santa, in his infinite wisdom, because he knows, cleaning up a very sharp chef's knife can be dangerous. Santa put in my stocking this awesome brush thing that's got like a plastic guard, and on the inside's bristles. Just put a little soap in there, and you just knife in
Yeah,
and out.
I like it.
Clean, safe, easy.
Yep.
And if I have lots of knives, I've used it every time since. Thank you, Santa. Yesterday, though, there was just one knife, and one knife and one bowl. So I'd already gotten the sponge all
Yep.
done on the bowl. So I'm like, I'll just use the sponge and knife. Well, there was a thing that like stuck on it, and I went to get it, and I don't know how it happened, but because the sponge was in this hand, and it slipped, and it came up like this, and then it just went. And so it's one of those things where you feel it, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I cut myself. It didn't feel that bad. And then you look down, and this was like,
Oh, gosh.
and I'm like, I think we need to go to the ER.
Yeah.
I got paper towels on. I got the bleeding to stop or whatever. And then it was like stopped. I'm like, maybe we can just put Band-Aids on it. The skin will come back. It'll be fine. But when I was at the ER, and they did a great job there at Ahuja, thank you, they were like, yeah, you needed to come in. 6 stitches. So
Yeah, it's significant.
that's a significant
not a
wound.
stitch.
Yeah.
That's
Very
plenty.
lucky, though. It could have been
Yeah.
way worse.
Yeah.
And now, just like I chop, and I only use my gloves now. I have a chopping glove, so that like the knife, even if you did what I did
A
to my other
chopping glove,
finger,
I like that.
yeah, that way, you won't cut your finger off.
Yeah.
So now I'm
They
gonna
made
have. I
chopping
got.
gloves. I'm going to be buying that right now.
Oh yeah, Amazon.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to buy some chopping gloves. I need that because you're worried about it. I usually go like
course.
this. So worst case scenario, I flick
A knuckle
a
off.
knuckle off.
Yeah, but that sounds terrible. Too.
No, it's probably not fun.
no.
no.
The other thing about when you do that, think about though, there's not much there, so you have a chance to like
Oh yeah,
get
Can
in
get
the
it.
bone,
Yeah,
and you
you
could
get
do
a-
some.
some major damage, and you could clean. You could
You
take
go-
it all the way off.
Yeah, you could go here. You could have like a double cut.
Yeah, not great.
Nobody wants a double cut.
Nobody wants a double cut.
Not me.
All right, one thought from every game this weekend. Hello, Gibbe.
Hi, boys. Good news. There's 5 games to talk about.
That's true.
The bad news, as Nate mentioned, one game, not so great.
One game. Well, there was
Or
only
one
one
game
that
was
there
great.
was. There was only
One
one that
great.
was.
One game was great.
There's
Hold
only
on.
one.
Who's Nate?
Well, that's your off-season name.
No, it's not.
That'd be something if it was.
If
That's a pretty funny line out of Gibbe.
was
Like
good.
if the off season you were Nate, off season Nate.
We're at the combine
I
in
do like
about
that.
6 weeks. Hey, this is Nate.
It's Nate. I like that.
The only
Say
person,
hi to
Totally
Nate.
different mentality.
the only person that calls me Nate on a consistent basis still is my father.
of course, which is why you bristle
The yoke.
when you hear it. The
Which is
yoke
why
is
I
so
love your
significant.
father.
Oh God.
All right, one thought on every wild card game. Again, not a great weekend for football, unfortunately, in the National Football League.
No.
And we'll kick things off with the Saturday night affair on Peacock. $23 million, I believe.
Yeah, it was funny.
Is what
you
they
guys,
were promoting.
You guys missed this because it was you're doing our game, but they were promoting it as if sign up for this and be part of history, like you were watching like the Apollo launch, right? Like that's how they were selling it to us, and it's like, yeah, okay, me paying $5 for another service.
I'm surprised how few people had Peacock already, though. So the NBC library, there's a ton of stuff on it. The WWE's on it.
Yeah, I just think there's a great deal of people in this country who aren't living in an app world still. I know that it seems like everybody is, but I think there's still a lot of people, especially in rural areas, that don't have the internet speed necessary to stream sporting events.
Correct.
So that's the part that's, that they
So how many people do we know? Like, have they?
it's 23
It
million.
was
is what watched
23
it.
million.
So that's-
what they announced Sunday night.
Isn't that really good?
Yeah, it's really good. It's the most to ever watch. They were trumpeting it on Sunday Night Football about what a grand achievement it was, and it's like, okay, like, yeah, but
Now we all have Peacock,
now everybody's got Peacock. So
or at least 23 million people do.
yeah,
For how
my,
long?
my experience
I'd love
was
to know
chunky.
the retention rate after.
I'll end up forgetting. I got all sorts of apps I forget I even have.
There's good stuff on Peacock, though. Especially
Yeah,
The
for
Boys,
sure.
the rest of the wrestling catalog
All
of
that's in
forever.
there. Yeah, so that'll be
Of
fun.
everything.
I had to get it for a Buckeye football game. I can't remember what game it was, Michigan State or Maryland. I can't remember. My experience
It was Purdue.
okay. My experience was very choppy. When I first got into it, it was like the
It looked
old,
like it was in slow motion.
yeah, it was like AOL dial-up days.
Yes.
Like play, stop, play. You
that's
remember
what
those
That's
days?
what Kayla said.
And then I exited out of it and I relaunched it, and then it was smooth from that point on. But the initial
That's what
was,
Miss Kay
was
said,
kind
yeah.
of brutal.
So the Chiefs in one of the top 5 coldest games in NFL history take down Miami 26-7. Bishop, one thought from you.
Well, look, this is one where there were two. There were, other than our game, there were 2 other ones where I just had it completely wrong, and this was one of them.
Yep.
I had Kansas City winning the game.
Yep.
I just couldn't. I just felt to me like a 16-13 game. And I thought Miami would show more. I thought they would be able to run it more. They really couldn't do anything offensively at all. Tyreek Hill being dominated the way that he was on the line of scrimmage by the Kansas City
Legarius
defensive
Sneed.
backs was incredible. And then he kind of just took himself out of the game in the second half. Like he just stopped playing in the second half of the game, which I thought was incredibly troublesome. It seemed pretty early that Miami didn't really have any interest in being there. I think the temperature probably had a lot to do with it. The most amazing thing that comes out of this is that for the first time, Patrick Mahomes will play a road playoff game Saturday or Sunday, whenever that game is. Sunday night, I guess. Whenever it is. That's amazing.
Sunday, 6:30, Chiefs at Bills.
So there
Sign
isn't
me
Sunday
up.
night football this week?
No, that is Sunday night.
CBS.
Wow.
ABC is Texans-Ravens.
Yeah. Early window.
Then Packers-Niners, Fox.
That's Saturday night.
Saturday night.
man. Packers-Niners. Beautiful.
That's gorgeous. Yeah.
Bucks-Leons.
That's afternoon.
Afternoon, NBC. And then CBS, 6:30.
So CBS jumps into the primetime window.
Yep.
But yeah, it was that doesn't really do it justice. It could have been a lot worse than 26-7. There was Kelsey had a drop at like the 5 that he walks in on a touchdown. Yeah, it was pretty wild. Also think it's amazing watching this game in 30 below wind chill. It's amazing to me that the second you draft and realize what Patrick Mahomes is, you don't start building a dome to take full advantage of it. I mean, it was crazy.
It was gross, too.
I feel like that fan base would fight you on it. I don't
think they would. I think there's loud people that think that there were empty seats, Gibby. Did you see the swaths of empty seats in the upper deck?
Yeah, it was
could've
not.
got in
It
for
was
$8
not safe to sit out there
no,
for that
you could have
game.
got in for $8 into a playoff game in Kansas
They were
City.
trotting out the NBC guys during our pregame
my
show
God,
for hits.
Enough of Jack Collinsworth in the cold. My God.
There were 3 games
It was
played in
1,000
domes,
boy.
and it was great.
Yeah, it just
By
it was
the way,
bad ball.
biggest offseason decision maybe in Miami is what you're going to do with that quarterback situation, because his 5th-year option's been picked up, $23 million guaranteed, but nothing after that. What do you do with that?
We'll probably let him play it out and play for a contract.
Yeah, let him. I think that's probably exactly what they do, because there's not. How could they dramatically upgrade it? He was really good for a lot of this year.
Yeah.
Really.
Really good.
Yeah.
By the way,
I
one
know he had
thought,
like 7
scores
thoughts, but
scores were unkind.
We got the spirit of it right. 4 out of 6. We had the right result, just didn't get the necessary score. We were 4-2 against the money line.
Yes, 2 and 4 with the spread.
Up next, guys, the game that I knocked out of the park
Crushed
with
it,
my
Gibby.
prediction all week.
So bold.
The Packers take down the Cowboys 48-32. Jarrow World again. 3 straight years, McCarthy and company. Double-digit wins, can't get out of the first round. Or their first playoff game. Off-season Nate, one thought from you. All right, I'll stop doing it. I had to do it one more time.
This went exactly as we thought, and exactly as Gibbe
it's
did not thought. Yeah, this one did.
Yeah, it did.
Bo and I both had Green Bay.
Yeah, I know.
You were like, no, this is the one lock of the week. It was the Gibbe lock of the week. Ugh,
Like
not
48-16
I
at
think-
one point.
I think changes are a coming, and I think you're going to see both McCarthy and Sirianni fired.
Well, yes, I agree with you on both fronts. This was such spectacular failure.
They'd won 16 in a row at home.
Yeah, it was just, and we used to have a little fun because of obviously his last name's LaFleur, and he's Peter LaFleur, dodgeball, all that. My guy can coach it. He can flat coach it.
And Love's good.
Love's really good, but he wasn't really good. They've coached him into this spot. Remember how he was early in the year? There was times he was dreadful.
I know, but I
he was
remember
like
I watched
fantasy good, and then it was like, and then he became football good. As this season went along, he became football good.
Yeah.
And LaFleur can flat out coach it. He kind of rejuvenated Rodgers at the end there, where Rodgers stacked up another couple MVPs under his tutelage. And then obviously now that we see what the full Rodgers experience is, he put up with a lot. And now he's got Love playing it this way, and their future is as bright as possibly can be.
And I feel like America might be rooting, and I know they're playing your 49ers this week, but I think America is rooting for this to shut up Aaron Rodgers.
Well, it's not a great argument on his behalf, the way
Correct.
that they're playing without him. So, but the Dallas failures are just unbelievable. Like Jarrah's had so many runs at this thing with teams, and like, if not
it's
this,
not a lack
when?
of talent.
Here's the thing that was weird to me.
Weird. Dak had one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen, like a veteran quarterback have.
He had some bad ones, but I just felt like early in the game, like he was kind of just missing CeeDee Lamb, or the ball would go off of his like fingertips, and like CeeDee Lamb had to get. It felt like they were immaturely tense.
The pressure of it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Not Green Bay.
Love is good.
He is good, and their weapons are better than people realize. Their defense is decent.
The first
got
one he
dudes.
threw to Romeo Dobbs on that opening drive where he just dropped back and just flicked it out there 35 yards like nothing. I was like, this guy's – I remember watching that Pittsburgh game. That had to be first half of the season. And I was like, I don't know. This guy is good. Like,
Yeah.
they are going to be good. He looks good.
Yeah, he does.
So I think they have a potential out with Dak, but I mean, he still has 3 years and supposedly $126 million left on his cap number.
I don't think – I think not. He's not going anywhere. Dak.
No, but
And they will get rid of McCarthy, and they will try to go in another direction.
they have a ton of free agents.
But they have Parsons is locked in and CeeDee Lamb. They'll be fine.
Yeah.
They need it, but it'll be a new regime.
Up next, the best game of the weekend. Thank God I just hung out and watched this all Sunday night. I needed this one.
This was fun.
Lions 24, Rams 23. The Leon tale of two halves. All offense in the first half, all defense in the second half. Bishop, one thought.
I think it was storybook in every way because Stafford was a warrior. My guy was a warrior in this game. He had a bloodied hand. He took a brutal hit, a brutal double hit where he got hit at the ribs, got hit in the head, and battled back from that. He was sensational in the game. They just couldn't score in the red zone in the first half, and it was too much to overcome. And it was storybook in that he played great, and yet Detroit won. Detroit got to win, and one of their most beloved players ever was great as an opponent. And you got the embrace between him and Goff. Like, it's such – you've been a Goff guy for a long time,
Yep.
but I've been a big supporter of him. I always thought he did not get the respect he deserved for the time that he was in with the Rams. That he was much better than people realized. It wasn't like Darnold and you're off the scrap heap. Like, he took his team to a Super Bowl. He's a dude.
Yes.
And it's – the other thing is it's a little bit of it's kind of the perfect mix up there of analytics and that they are incredibly aggressive on fourth downs and the way to go about game management, but also like kind of guts on how they put the team together. Like first-round picks on running backs and tight ends and off-ball linebackers, and it all worked. You got to give them credit. It all worked.
Totally. And again, this was everything you wanted. Goff, 22 of 27, 277 and a touchdown, 10.3 yards per attempt. Stafford, 25 of 36, 367, 2 touchdowns, 10 yards per attempt. I mean, they were both spectacular.
But
this was
Stafford
just
couldn't finish it inside the red zone in the second half.
That was really it. That was the difference in the game. Red zone efficiency, the Lions were 3 for 3. Rams 0 for 3. And that was ultimately the difference in this game. I thought it was a great game. I thought both teams looked good. I think that I think the Lions probably feel pretty good about what's their matchup in the next round, and I think it's setting up for Lions-Niners, which would be a ton of fun. Goff, Bay Area kid, Cali kid, where he played his college football at Cal Berkeley, would be pretty neat. Him coming there. Obviously, still work to be done, but this game was everything I wanted to be. This was the one game I was most excited for. It delivered on the play level, on the emotional level, on the guys that were the principals in this trade. I mean, this game comes down to, by the way, a kind of a ballsy call, 2nd and 8. They let Goff throw it. If it was an incompletion, you never know. I still think McVay should have taken his time out at 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yes.
Before the 2-minute warning. I don't understand the thought process on doing that. And he made that great throw to Amon-Ra St. Brown to ice the game. I mean, that was...
Who's kind of turned into like Steve Smith.
Amon-Ra St. Brown's a stud.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Smith's a stud. Like that's kind of what he kind of has the same build, the physicality.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
first team All-Pro.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And ultimately, thanks to Dallas for choking. Like they get a home game this weekend.
Yeah. Yep.
I love how they called out to in the broadcast the guy like. It's not Bobby Cart Jr., but it was like Bobby Cap or something like that, who had been a season ticket holder for 60 years. And you could tell he'd seen some things that were not so pleasant. And then he got to have his moment. Tarico kept giving him a little shout-out. It was great.
It was a moment for Tarico, too, though. I mean, he lives in Detroit.
He lives in that area, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This
game was perfect. It was the perfect game of the weekend. I hope this weekend is better. You have two pretty big numbers out there for this week. We don't have to do guess the spreads because I saw them when we were looking at the networks. We can do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'll be hopefully – who knows? The line may change by tomorrow. So it might not even be accurate. But that's what you want. Good, tense fourth-quarter football. And you only got that in one game.
Yeah.
Our game was over. The Chiefs game was over. The Packers game was over. The Bills-Steelers, I guess, wasn't over, but it was it never felt like it wasn't over.
We are there now. Buffalo 31, Pittsburgh 17. I thought it was a bogus roughing the passer penalty in the fourth quarter late that led to that Bills final touchdown that was the difference in the game. So, to be honest,
I mean, Buffalo was never going to lose this game.
No,
they were never going to lose it.
No,
it was just a matter of the margin, and they were good enough to us that they took care of the margin. One of the few that did. We thank you very much. I think the one thing that I think is really tricky is this was a really rough weekend for the officials. So on the Allen run, the 52-yard touchdown run, it's the Pickett play, right? Like he's simulating like he's going to slide. And the defense stands up because you can't hit him or you're going to add 15 yards to it. And instead of sliding, he just bursts through as they all slow up. Is that what we want?
No, it's interesting. So I was only watching that on my phone, and I was actually, I think, being stitched at that very moment. So I didn't see it through that lens. I thought he kind of slowed down to pick a spot and then just took off.
He slowed down to start to slide. I mean, He looked like he was going to slide.
Yeah.
And as he did so, the Steelers stood up like, okay, like we're not going to hit him and add 15 yards to this. And he just sprinted through as they stood up.
He's a weapon. And one of the things after watching the 2 games yesterday that I came away with is he's a weapon as a runner. I think he had 8 carries, 74 yards and touchdown. He obviously can throw it very effectively. And it gets to the next game is Jalen Hurts was so effective because of how well he ran. And he didn't run – I think he ran 1 time in that game.
Sure.
For like 5 yards. That in the playoffs, and I don't know if you heard the commentary. I was pretty dialed because otherwise I was in the middle of chaos. But they had talked about how Allen's rushing attempts ramped up at the end of the season to prepare for the playoffs. They're going to use his legs a lot more when they need to. And I thought that was a pretty cool, good note, good find by their stats department. And you could see when they needed something, they were like, all right, we're running it with the big fella.
If they don't win it, if they don't win the AFC now, they may never. Like, this is it. They get Kansas City at home. Baltimore's got the same playoff stuff they do. They've been at the at-bats. Like, they got to beat Kansas City at home this weekend. They have to. This is the year. I know they got a ton of injuries. Everybody does. But, jeez, got to be now for them.
Yeah.
Up next, final one, Monday Night Foosball, Tampa Bay 32, Eagles 9. I don't even know where to begin on this. I don't know what happened with the Eagles.
This is another
Nobody
one of
knows.
those that was definitely closer than the score indicated.
Yeah, it was a 1-score game.
Yeah.
Until
And
Philly
then-
forgot how to tackle again.
Well, you go for 2 when you had just kicked it and been down 6. Like
16-9 when they
what
did
was the
that.
point of getting to 5? I don't even understand
It
the
didn't
logic.
even make sense. Like, just of course you just get it to 6.
Right.
It's so stupid. Nonsense.
I thought that was pretty crazy. This was a game, and Baker's been in 2 of these games. I don't know if you guys remember. I want to say it was maybe Christmas time a year ago against Denver when he was with the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
And Denver had been a good defense, and then they came into that game and, like, did not try, did not tackle, did not rush the quarterback. Nobody covered anybody. They gave, I think, 50 or something to the Rams, and everybody got fired.
Yeah.
Watching this did not feel like a playoff game from the
No.
Eagles. It felt like a game where everybody on the Eagles was trying to get their coaches fired.
It definitely did.
I mean, the safety Jalen Hurts took from the 14 was one of the worst safeties I've ever seen.
Well, I don't know what
The-
he's doing.
The tackling?
Was just laughable.
You had
I flipped over to Manningcast, so I saw them with Bruce Arians and then with
Did you see with Ray Lewis? Ray
Yeah.
Lewis was incensed.
Not having it, no.
So their touchdowns, one was a 56-yarder. The first one was a 44-yarder on plays that should have gone for 6 yards,
Yeah.
10 yards,
It was wild.
15 if we're getting crazy.
I said this. I've said this a couple times in the offseason about Hurts. He needed to stack it, and the reality is you're going to get figured out a little bit. Your offense is going to get figured out. I think you're astute to bring out Steichen. The fact that he's not there, I'm sure that's a huge part of it.
But
as
where's
well.
the designed runs for him?
Well,
That's
here's
was
what
so
I'm getting
effective.
at.
Where's it at?
I think that you cannot understand. You can't overestimate the beating he takes.
Yes.
Not just last year with designed run, but every time they do that tush push, he is getting pounded on that play.
By the way,
Pounded.
they ripped his head off. How was that not a penalty? They were literally pulled him back
Pulled
by
him
his face
head.
max.
I think people are so sick of the play
That
that
they're like, we're
they
not
just
throwing a
let
flag?
anything go on
Yeah.
it. But he takes a bludgeoning in that, and he's not healthy. He's not right, and I think it affects the way he plays the position. And I think that's what you saw in Philly. Is that. But it was so gutless. I agree with you. It seems like they want out of that operation.
In 22, he averaged 8 yards an attempt, 67% completions, 22 touchdowns, 6 picks, He ran it 165 times for 760 yards and 13 touchdowns. This year,
his first run last night wasn't until the third quarter.
Yeah, it was for 5 yards.
Or fourth quarter. It was a 15-yard run called back on a holding penalty.
This year, he was down a full yard per attempt, 65% passing. His rating was way, way down because he threw 15 picks instead of 6. Rushing attempts were similar in attempts. He averaged 3.85 yards a carry. That's probably weighed down by the tush push. 15 touchdowns, 35 yards per game rushing. I don't know. The whole stuff that was going on with A.J. Brown seemed very weird. They
were just going through the motions defensively.
They looked pretty good when we went there, but they changed. Remember, they brought in Desai and said, you're out. Now we're going to play this. There he is, man. The great B. Lynch. And then they're going to bring in Patricia, and he's going to start playing all these like zone drops for their pass. It was like
so weird.
Why did they just not keep going with Desai?
Yeah, it was so strange, and they were so good in the game against Kansas City. Like that was like their Super Bowl when they won in Kansas City. Like,
they were 10-1.
They were 10-1 at that time, and then they got boat raced a lot down the stretch. So
their record down them and the Jags were like the two worst teams in the league down the stretch. I felt it was funny going in the game. We did the scores on
Thursday.
Taped it. Yeah,
Thursday,
we did Thursday. By the time that game kicked off, I was 1,000,000,000% sure the Bucs were going to win.
Did seem that way, didn't
like
it?
1,000,000,000%. I was like,
yeah, this was not.
They stink.
They do. They did. Absolutely. Be part of one of the most passionate fan bases in the NFL. Join Next Gen STM, presented by Ticketmaster. Official wait list of the Cleveland Browns. Being in Next Gen STM is the best chance to become a season ticket member in future seasons. Visit clevelandbrowns.com/nextgenstm to reserve your spot today. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily, brought to you by Bally Bet, sports betting partner of your Cleveland Browns, now live in Ohio on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Truck or motorcycle accident causes you injury, call their injury lawyers at 1-800-ELK Ohio for a free case review. Elk & Elk is a proud partner of your Cleveland Browns. And now let's head to the podium from Sunday. Kevin Stefanski speaking to the media.
Okay, these days
You're not.
fun just meeting with the players, and it's very abrupt when the season ends, and all our guys really put in so much work, and to not be playing any more games, that's tough. That's hard for our guys and hard for us as coaches. So that's the immediate emotions and the first thing you think about when you wake up on a day like this. And then you also have to step back and express gratitude, because I am extremely grateful for this football team. They work like crazy. They did everything I asked them to do, really going all the way back to April. And they fought for each other. I think those are a bunch of guys that care about each other. And I think you saw that throughout this season, and just the things that they went through and kept coming back. So I'm really proud of this football team. Again, disappointed in how it ended, of course. Disappointed when it ends, but I don't want to lose sight of the accomplishments of this football team, and I give them a ton of credit for that. But with that, I'll take any questions.
So much has been made about kind of the buy-in that you had this year. Everybody sort of pulling the rope, in the same direction, whatever cliche you want to use. How difficult is that to replicate? Because it's not going to be the same group next year.
Right.
Necessarily. How do you try to replicate that?
Yeah, I mean, every year is different, as you mentioned, Chris. I mean, the players are always different, and that's the NFL. It's never the same ever. So you treat each year differently. I would tell you the core of this football team, the guys that we know are coming back, are guys that represent who we are. That understand what they need to do on a day-to-day basis to be great. So we're excited about that, but. Bottom line is, when you're talking about the locker room, it's the people. It is just the people in that locker room, and I feel strongly about the people.
We haven't spoken to Deshaun, and rolling it forward a little bit, are you confident he's going to be ready for the start of the season? Can you give us any update whatsoever on his rehab?
Yeah, he's doing great in rehab. I'm confident he'll be ready to roll this spring. He's chomping at the bit, but he's doing everything he's supposed to do when it comes to what the doctors are telling him, and as he rehabs through this, but he'll be ready to roll.
Kevin, the injuries really just caught up to you yesterday.
Yeah, we just didn't play well yesterday. We didn't coach well enough, Jeff. I know you can point to injuries. I think every team could point to injuries, but we didn't do the things you have to do to win on the road. Pretty simple.
Where you see Flacco and Watson coexisting?
Yeah, I'd leave all those things up to, obviously, Andrew in this offseason. I will say this about Joe. Joe was awesome for this football team. He did a great job, battled like crazy. I know he enjoyed it. We obviously wish yesterday's outcome was different, but, I have a ton of respect for Joe and what he was able to do.
Do you feel, Kevin, that all your coaches will be back?
Yeah, I think we're evaluating everything right now, Tony. The other thing, as you know, is some guys will get opportunities over the next couple of weeks, so we'll see how it all shakes out.
Can you speak specifically about Joel Bitonio? We saw him in there with a boot on his right ankle. You said he was playing a high ankle sprain yesterday.
He's unbelievable. He's unbelievable, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. When you talk about guys fighting for each other, he did not have to go back in that game with a high ankle sprain, and most people couldn't, and most people wouldn't. And he was not going to let his guys down. He battled to the end. He'll rest up and heal up, and but he's the quintessential teammate. That's what we're talking about when you talk about the Cleveland Browns, guys that will do anything and everything they can for their teammate.
You guys made the playoffs in 2020, and I think there's always kind of that outside perspective of like, well, hey, now we got it'll happen again, and it took you a couple years to kind of get back. How do you protect from that mindset sort of setting in of like, oh yeah, we'll be back next year, and kind of keep working? Is it as simple as just using last night as an example?
Well, yeah, and I think our guys know that, and the NFL is set up that way, where you see new teams in the playoffs every single year. So, our goal is to win championships. That's all 32 clubs. Talk about that. So when you get back, you start putting the work in to set yourself up for those type of things. But we know that all of that is earned when you talk about playoffs and you talk about putting yourself in position to win championships.
A little bit, and this might be a little philosophical, but when they do leave, when guys who had an impact end up moving on, what do they leave with the team for the next year?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just talking to one of our players about a guy like Malcolm Smith. Played a couple years for us at linebacker and had a huge impact, and maybe didn't show up on the stat sheet all the time, but he had a huge impact on that young linebacker room. So there's always guys that you wish you could bring back, everybody, and guys there's different opportunities and those type of things, but you do learn from a lot of veterans that you bring into your program.
Kevin, do you feel you and Alex Van Pelt need to go back into the lab this spring with Watson like you did last year?
I think every spring you have to do that. I really do, Tony, because the game is changing. The NFL continues to evolve year to year. I say this all the time, but you put on tape from 10 years ago, it doesn't look the same. So you're always trying to stay ahead of the curve as much as you can. So, yeah, I think all three sides of the ball, you got to go into the lab.
You're talking about guys who have opportunities. Kareem Hunt talked today about potentially an opportunity, but obviously this is home.
Yeah.
Did he have more left than you guys thought, considering he wasn't with you guys and he is leading you guys in touchdowns?
Well, I'll say this about Kareem. I'm so appreciative of him and the way he played and the style with which he played. Obviously, pre-injury to Nick, we didn't have a spot, but to Kareem's credit, he stayed in great shape. We brought him in, worked him out. He looked great. Picked back up the system right away and played really good football for us and made plays in high leverage moments and scored touchdowns. And obviously yesterday, having the ability to make a playoff in the goal line, make a play in the red zone. So he provided huge value for us. And, just he's a battler. Love the way he runs, the style with which he runs. Gave us a huge jolt that we needed.
Again, we stumped for Miles to be, for Defensive Player of the Year a couple of weeks ago. He started off with 13 sacks and just, couldn't be stopped. What happened, the last 6-7 games with just one sack?
Yeah, I would caution you to judge too much of defensive football off of sacks. I think that can be really dangerous just to look at sacks. I think pressures are really
back at 30.
You want to look at and affecting the quarterback. And, with Miles, the other unique thing about him, as you guys know, teams do everything in their power to make sure he doesn't make those disruptive plays. So he's getting a tight end, he's getting the line is sliding to him, they're running away from him, those type of things. But if you just look at his impact, and particularly if you want to use pressure rate, I think that's something you can look at. But if you look at his impact overall,
You're up.
Unbelievable.
All right, there you go. There's Coach. Still so much more to come, and this time I actually mean it. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland.
Ooh.
All right, time for your great clip of the game presented by Great Clips. It's going to be great. Here is, I believe this is Jim's call of Kareem. Yep.
Second down, waiting on the snap. He's got it. Straight drop, shovel pass. Here comes Hunt. Hit 8-10. He's to the 5. He's in. Touchdown. Give Kareem Hunt a pair of touchdowns in this playoff game, and the Browns lead again.
And there it was. God, that was so much hopeful.
Well, yeah, we were ahead
just so much
14-10. You
joy.
answered, and then their very next play was a 76-yard catch and run touchdown.
Yeah, and then it was like, good Lord, we're going to have to chase this the whole game. Can we keep up with it? And the answer was no. You could not.
Yeah.
Did you guys see the comments over the weekend from Kelly Stafford on some of the things that were said to her kids at the Detroit game?
No, because it's going to make me sad, I think.
It is. But it comes on the heels of, did you see the Jerry Reinsdorf stuff with Chicago, with his widow?
I did.
Okay.
That was not so
Did you
great.
see this?
No.
Reinsdorf's wife?
No.
Okay, so the Bulls did their first ever Ring of Honor, and so Jerry Reinsdorf went in. He was general manager of those
course,
teams,
as he
and he should. I don't need to. Everybody who knows Reinsdorf knows the history, knows that the history is written by Jordan and views him as the worst, right?
Yeah.
So Jordan wasn't there, Pippen wasn't there going in. Again, all of them went into their first rings. They were all going in, but none of them were there.
They didn't show up?
No. So
That's crazy.
So Reinsdorf passed in like 18, right? But he's still public enemy number one in Chicago. So they put his picture up on the big screen, and they boo him viciously, loudly and viciously. And then they cut to an image of his widow who's at the game and distraught that her deceased husband is being booed, as you would be. This is not on the fans. This is on the organization. You know that Krause is going to be booed. You have got to get the word out that his widow is going to be there so that they know there's the context that his widow will be representing
Let's have some class.
Jerry Krause. Let's have a little bit of class here. And instead, none of it happened. So if the first thing you see is his image on the screen, you're going to hear the booing. Everybody knows that in Chicago. How do you do that?
They
and to
could've
that
made-
end, same thing with Kelly Stafford. Like the girls have jackets on that say Detroit born, LA raised. That is going to bristle everybody in Detroit. Matt Stafford, as much as they appreciate him, love him, all of those things, he's public enemy number one in a playoff game in Detroit.
Yes.
Like, what do you think was going to happen?
Yes. I'm sure there are plenty of people like, I hope he plays well, but we win. Which is actually
what happened.
Exactly
That's
what
why
happened.
it was storybook.
Yeah.
Just communicate and then have some sense on the
Have some
the
sense.
Bulls sense. Communicate it so that the fans
and they
know.
also should have made a video. They should have said prior to the video, like something like, tonight, we're inducting blah blah blah. His widow is in attendance. Here's a video, and
Let
in
him
the
know.
video, have it be.
I don't know if it makes a difference.
He's the one that
You got a
brought you
chance at
Jordan.
least.
He's the one that brought you this. Blah blah blah. The good.
What needed to happen was like promoting going that he his widow was going to be there, that we're celebrating the architect, the guy that put it together. Forget about what happened at the end.
Yeah.
But the guy that built the dynasty.
and that she was there.
Yeah.
I think if the fans know she's there, it's not quite as vitriolic as
agree.
it was because they just saw his image and booed like crazy. It was just heartbreaking. You have to have some sense on these things. Now, so much more to come. Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland. your latest example of Kyle Shanahan being a gangster. He's available today in San Francisco, and he said they started preparing for Green Bay in the second quarter, kind of insinuating I know how this ends.
How about this? 49ers at 1 o'clock today Eastern time dropped their hype video.
Yeah.
Guess who is featured?
S. Young.
The voice and the image.
The voice of Steve Young.
Angelic.
Why do they besmirch
Steve Young
16
is the
way
voice
they
of
do?
the 49er hype.
Everybody, let me tell you something. You go around,
think of a better
everybody's
guy.
got Montana jerseys on their wall. Nobody has a Steve Young jersey on their wall.
I don't know. Maybe it's a generational thing. A younger generation. Steve Young is their Joe Montana.
He won 1 Super Bowl. What are you talking about?
Welcome to the
Listen,
offseason, Nate.
Offseason, Nate.
Next level is next. Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland.